Hi, it's Colleen Schmidt from Divination Counseling Service, today presenting the return charts. So we're going to be looking at solar return charts, which happen around your birthday or on your birthday, depending on your age. And so they're good for a year. And then we also have a lunar return. And since the moon does a cycle every month, the lunar return is every month. Now, the beauty of these return charts are that if you have a more accurate time, you can get more detail. But if you don't have a real accurate time, you can still work with the solar returns and the lunar returns, and it can still give you some accurate detail. So they have a really good value for people who are not quite sure of the exact moment of birth, or if their birth time that they have is correct. That's when solar returns come into play, and they're very useful. Solar returns are more of a Uranian concept, I believe, rather than, so they've only been done around the early 1900s. I don't know if I'm right on this. You could correct me. Whereas a secondary progress chart, for example, has existed almost as long, if not as long as a horary chart. So it goes back a lot further. Western astrologers have been using them a lot longer. So however, I have to say that in my own practice, the solar returns and the lunar returns have been a cornerstone of my income. So they have really helped me not only maintain a business, but to grow a business as an astrologer. So before I get into the charts and how we do them and what we're going to be doing with it, I wanted to first thank all of you for watching this video, most importantly, but all of my subscribers. And if you're not a subscriber, please subscribe. I'm really close to a goal, and it would be really wonderful to break that, to get over that goal. Also, if you would like, because apparently that's really important. So, if you would, I'd really appreciate it. But just thank you for being here, for helping me build the venue, and for allowing me into your life. So continuing with our solar return, lunar returns, I do want to specify that this is not my first video on the returns. I am going to do this video differently because I have more visuals, but also I am going to put it to a legitimate situation, my own. I'm still having a hard time, even though I have permission, to use real people. So I have to say I'm sorry about that. I I just feel so strongly about sharing personal information that I want to just, where I'm safest, I'll start with myself. So in order for us, though, to see the validity, it would be better if I did work with a real chart and a real situation. So that's what we're going to be doing today. So once again, thank you for being here. Let's look at my chart returns for the year 1994. It was a very important year for me. It's even sometimes hard for me as I did the prep work, and I've worked on this already before showing this. It was a long time ago. Could be, well, we're over 25 years. We're pushing 30 years here. And I really it was a year where I had a lot of loss of life. I lost my father, I lost a cousin, and I lost my brother, all in one year. So of course, that makes this a solar return well worth studying. The irony of this chart is that when I lost my father, I found my teacher. And I think it was almost around the same time. It's mind-blowing. It's in the charts. So we're going to be looking at mostly Janus programming because most of the viewers I've noticed seem to use Janus software, which is terrific. So I'm learning it and we'll be working with it today. And at the very end, if depending, I may go and add the asteroids in which case I would use solar fire. But we're going to start with Janus because that's what those of you I've heard from are using. And I want to be in keeping with that. I want to encourage any software use. So let's go in and look at these charts and we're going to be doing a couple things. We're going to be looking at the solar return itself, but also what's called a precess corrected time solar return. And you can do the same thing with a lunar. And people will say, and I know astrologers even say this, why are you working with both? Wouldn't it be just better to work with the precessed corrected time? No, because the detail that the two charts bring to the table is just mind blowing. And I'll take a moment and show where these things are in the Jan's program. So at the same time, you're learning how to use your program for your own returns. So I do want to start at that very beginning place. I also am going to be talking about not just the use of those two charts, but how it applies, because most importantly, it has to apply to the radix chart, to the natal chart itself. So we'll be briefly kind of checking in with that and just looking at that. So if you will, we're going to now jump to the Janus programming, and we're going to see what the Janus software has to say about the year 1994 for me. So we're back, and I got to get off of that. As soon as you do the keyboards, everything seems to work. So we're looking at the chart right now, and the chart I'm sorry, this is an event chart. I was going to say, wait, that's not what I worked with. Let me just get rid of this chart because I'm going to be jumping so much. I don't want to have that chart. So here we are looking at the solar return. See, I did the lunars as well. And let's talk about how I got here. How did I get this chart? Well, I started off with my chart. Okay. I would then go to predictive, because all of the charts that you see, here we go, under predictive are charts that are used by astrologers to predict, whether it be for people or for events. So you have a progressed chart, a directed chart. You see all of these charts. That's your secondary progressed. Here is your directed, solar arc directed, full name. And these are used a lot in astrology. And like I said, these are maybe the oldest. However, I am more of this thought form, which is, again, newer, more modern. I'm definitely a modern astrologer. And the return chart is, and you can see we can also progress the return chart, either solar or lunar, and it'll progress them. And then you go all the way down. And some of the things I'm going to talk about eventually would be timing and diurnals, which are like daily charts. So one of these days I'll get to all of this stuff, but I want to start at a place where I know I can grab a lot of people, because what I'm doing isn't that difficult to follow or to understand or to implement. And then from there, I'll get a little bit more complicated. But so we have the natal chart. We go into the predictive, we pull up that we want to return, okay? Now, in the return, you're going to first go with the location. Now, mine always defaults to where I live, so you have to go back in. I wasn't born here, so I got a city, and I'm going to put it in there, okay? Following what I've done. That's how you do it. You would then go, what type of return are you doing? Precess corrected. They also had converse, which is really interesting. So everything's in reverse. And the geocentric latitude. Okay, so what we're doing is we're going to be using a precessed and then a regular. And that's all you have to know is right there. You could check off what you want. You would then do a number of returns. What I did was you can either do it from birth, or I took a time period. Like I think I said the beginning of 93, January 1 of 93. And then I said, give me 24 of these returns. And that's how I got, and I was working lunars. If you're doing solars, you won't need that many. Okay. It goes up to 100. They both do. But a solar return is going to be for every year of your life. So, should we be so blessed to live to be 100, so honored, you could put in from birth and do every chart from there. If you're somebody who's just getting into this, you might want to take it from birth and do every chart to the age that you are now. But do it not just for one, but come back in and then do it again for the other. Okay. So in this software, they are done separately. So what you would do is you'd pull all this up and then you calculate the date returns. Okay. And then you begin to pull up what it is that you are looking for. I was looking for 93. I already have it, but you just check mark it, you cast the chart, and you're finished. But if you did precessed, you'd have to go back in, make sure you still have that birth chart, because I can't tell you how many times I've made the mistake of continuing with the other return instead of putting back in the natal chart. So you want to stay with that. But you could go back in, you could go back and then do the same thing for your precessed, calculate them all out, and then once again, pick a date. You see what I mean? And you would then cast the chart. So that's the best way to do it. And in Janus, you really don't jump around. Your tendency would be to stay with that original chart and then pull all the returns because of the way the program is set up. So I kind of liked that, by the way. So we're going to close this up because I actually have these charts. So in my recent charts, I was doing my homework, my due diligence, and I did pull up these charts. Now, one of the things that I do want to talk about with the charts is that in particularly this program, you could look at the aspects and you could also look at the midpoints, and we could do all that. And I would say to you, that would be a really good thing to do. But that would only be doing part of the work because number one, you'd have to do it for both charts. And then you'd have to apply that to the natal chart. Basically what you're doing is you're taking, let me show you this. You're taking this midheaven and this ascendant, which also pulls in then the IC and the descendant because it's all part of the angles. And you would put them with the subsequent planets that are going 10 on either side. So for here, we could start at 8 and we could go all the way to 28. Okay. So basically you take these degree points in big clumps. And that's the reason why we do them. It's because of the asteroids, because that way I could take all of the asteroids from both angles. And I'll show you that down the road. But it really makes sense here. Everything but the node is a part of this ascendant. Okay. You would take that and you go back to this chart and you would put all of that where it belongs, which would be here in the 9th house. And you can see that the part of fortune and the moon of this are being aspected by the midheaven of this particular chart. Okay, that this particular chart, the ascendant really features females. You're going to find this out too, that it does. And that it also features from the 12th, because that means that the emotions are hidden, but it's a very emotional time. Also, the chart is ruled by Pluto. And if I go to my recent charts and I go to where Pluto rules this chart, Pluto's in the 1st house and it's aspecting the ascendant. So there's an intense transformations that are occurring with this chart. Okay. It's needless to say that it was a really tough year. There was a lot going on, but I was also had the opportunity to learn and look at the beautiful trine to Mercury. Okay. But during that year, and I just want to really put some highlight on some of these aspects. I was using the ascendant because I can. I have a rectified chart. I actually, Heike Pot in Germany, another teacher of mine, did a rectification for me, something she really specializes in. And we corrected it really to the second. This ascendant's very good, but say that you're not sure about the ascendant and you know that it's roughly in Scorpio and about mid Scorpio. So you would want to rely on that to look at this because you would still, this is still important, 10 on each side, remember? That's giving you a lot of leeway. So anyway, let's look at the, okay, oh my, sorry about that. I wanted to look at the astrology here because I want to point out that that year I lost a cousin and I lost a brother. And Mercury is siblings and separation. But at the same time, I also lost a cousin and I was in contact with a cousin I'm still close to actually during that time because another had lost her siblings. So siblings were a big deal, okay, for all of us. So at that time, here we're looking at all of these squares. Look at this. What a craziness is going on. And again, I'm using that ascendant because I can. But even if you were using the sun, you would have to be able to notice that that sun is in square to Cupido, the family, Pluto, transformations. So there's a lot of uncomfort, a lot of discomfort with regards to what's going on within the family itself. So this was a very telling chart, but remember that we're looking at two of them. I also want to point this out. Look at this. All of this is in the third house, the house of siblings. And since I lost a sibling and another cousin lost a sibling, there is this real sense of, siblings, the importance of siblings. And another sibling had, I think there was even a health crisis with somebody in yet another part of the family. So there's so much going on at this time. Okay. One of the factors here, now you don't see anything from it because I put this in. Okay. This has been put in, which is ironic. And this is my mother. This is a parent-child thing. And my mother lost a child that year. And I also was around my mother a lot at that point. So you have this Cirrus in here, again, squaring all of this stuff, conjuncting the moon. What you'll find out is that this particular moon, which is, literally squaring my own personal moon, but it also at that point is conjuncting Chiron, is telling, and look at Chiron in the chart, it's telling me it's a turning point in my life, that this particular year is a turning point. And it really is. I did want to point out the beautiful trine. I did start studying with one of my teachers that year that I still study with. All the sextiles are telling you that there is opportunity in here that year, in this chart. So it's not all bad, but it's a lot of bad. It's a lot of bad. And not bad. I don't want to use bad and good because that's not astrology lingo. But I want to point out that the chart itself is very active, that there's a lot of red. There's a lot of difficulty, a lot of struggle. Now, one of the things we have here is this black moon. And this is kind of important because this is a black moon at 29 degrees of Aries. And you'll notice from the chart, my chart, that my own personal black moon is within a degree. It's interesting because a lot of astrologers do not use the black moon as much as I believe they're missing opportunities. That really points to the fact that there's something that is going on that needs to be looked at. So as you go into that chart, and it's in the sixth house, it's in the day-to-day, but it's so close to even to that cusp. But it's you just know that there's transformations going on, that this is huge, that we have conjunctions with Neptune and Uranus at that time in Capricorn. There's a couple of things that are going to be not so unusual, but relate to those two planets. One of which is that my father, though he did die suddenly of a heart attack, Uranus, he did have heart disease, Neptune, Uranus, and so it wasn't a surprise that he died with a heart attack. It was just a surprise that he was so young. The other people that died that year, my cousin had an interesting scenario. She was the next one, and she was only 27 years old and died because they found her body under her car, like she had run herself over, which I don't see how that's possible, with her infant daughter still in the car. And there was something about a puddle. And I don't know if she was stuck. I don't really know all the details, but Neptune, it's very weird, Uranus sudden event. So that's, and I also want to point out this, Admetus is very close to the descendant. Now, Admetus does not have to signify death, but it can, because it's that stopping. It's that you're done. That's it. And so there's that Admetus at the 7th. And it's telling me again that whoever the people are that I'm dealing with, they would be closer. It's more day to day, 6th house to the 7th. The Admetus is opposite that Jupiter, like almost exactly, very, very close. So again, it's that sudden, and also telling you that, Jupiter with Admetus could also be studying something where I can really get to the bottom of it, which is what I've done with this chart, because literally when my father passed, and I'll show it in the lunar returns, when my father passed, it was the 5th of February. My lunar return began officially, although they usually roll in, takes 2 weeks for them to roll in. And the chart that we're looking at now is a lunar return for then. And you get here, look at this. So this is that chart. And once again, the lunar returns that are so close to the solar returns don't really, my teacher would say, they're not really as important because the solar return always takes precedent. But even in this, Saturn rules the chart. This is the midpoint of my sun and moon. Even this chart is telling us, wow, these things are happening now and how important they are. This lineup at the midheaven. Okay, now that's a solar return, but watch this. Same thing. Okay, just reversed. So you have at this 29 degree 55 second place, you have the sun. Actually, you have Sirius, Vulcan, the sun, the moon, Venus, Saturn, and Mercury. So I'm getting a lot of news of separation, news of deaths, basically. Okay. And in this chart, because of the Chronos, and you're going to also find that Chronos is a big factor from my natal chart for several reasons in both charts. That's my father. So how interesting is that? So my father is affected, okay? And the changes are in the family. There's still a Jupiter there. And by the way, I'm a person who's really interested. My father and I talked about death a lot, and I wanted him to come to me in my dreams, which I'll be able to show you that on the asteroid one. And he did, and he was really happy. So that Jupiter is really significant. The Jupiter to Mercury, though, here again, is really significant because at that time, I am learning literally so much deeper. And by the way, this is opposite my moon. So there's another factor here. I'm going through an aspect where Admetus is going over my moon. So we could be looking at things where I could have lost my mother, but it's also telling me that a woman could die, which my cousin was, but also a lot is happening to my mother. She is enduring a tremendous amount. And remember that Sirius, which I did leave in here, Demeter, which I did leave in here, is playing a vital role here at my midheaven. Okay. Now, what I'm going to do with these two charts is that I am going to take the charts and I'm going to, what? Okay, hold on. Yeah, hold on. So what I'm going to do, I don't know where I am. Here we go. What I'm going to do is I am going to pull up my chart and we're going to put the 2955 Aquarius, so we can see falls within aspect of my own personal ascendant, an even bigger deal, that black moon Lilith. That chart would also feature the black moon Lilith. Let's see, let me find it. Here it is. At 0 degrees. Wait a minute. That one's is 0 degree. So it's actually forming at that time, to mine, they're both at 0. They're an inconjunct. Sorry, it took me a minute to figure that. So that black moon is playing off my black moon. Okay. If I go to this chart, look where this one is. So it's almost as though the black moon is hanging out around 29 degrees, 0 degrees of Taurus, when my own personal black moon is at 0 degrees of Pisces. That is an inconjunct, a perfect opportunity, as they would say. So as we then put the 1859 in, 1859 falls in my personal 9th house with my moon. So there's an ascendant moon. And then you'd have to go the opposite. And this is where it starts to really play in. At 18 degrees, almost 19 degrees, 27 degrees of Taurus would then be the descendant or the opposing angle. So the descendant is Kronos, an authority figure. Okay, in this case, it was my father, a parent. But it's also reminding you that because of Jupiter and because of, and Jupiter's here, and by the way, that's an out of sign trine. Or is it? Or is it a sextile? It's a sextile. So there is the 27 degree is not, it's still an aspect to that 18 degrees because of the 10 degree range. I hope I'm not losing anybody on that. You can go 10 degrees because we use so much. We use asteroids, we use trans-Neptunians. So we use these angles and we go 10 degrees. The other thing about going 10 degrees, if you do not have an accurate time of birth, you're good, you're golden. We really gathered in some stuff, and that's what helps the accuracy of these. Other things I wanted to point out right here. Okay, we have, see that? All right, now let's go back to the recent, because my Pluto is truly in here. There we go. Okay, so we have, my own is at 0 degrees, which would be opposite that Saturn, which would be down here at the IC. My personal Pluto is in this conversation. It's just mind-blowing. So what you're doing is I'm going to be putting 24 degrees of Gemini, which is my 4th house. So this would be my 10th. And then 2955 is my 1st house. So this would be the 7th. And here again, we have an aspect to that Chiron at 7 degrees of Virgo. He's an aspect to my Pluto, to my Zeus, and to the transiting Chiron at the time, which is turning points. My own personal Chiron is also involved because it's 17 degrees of Aquarius. And it's being hit by Mars. It's being hit by, let's look at it. It was this chart, I believe. Yeah, this chart. In this chart, it's that 17, here we go. See that? The moon falls right on my Chiron. It's a turning point in my life. There is everything in my life is telling me that. And it's just a solar return. But what I've gained from the study of this particular solar return is mind-blowing. It's absolutely mind-blowing. And the same things can be reflected in those lunars that came up close to the solars. So they also were in there. But the real thing that I want to show here is how you play with this and how you go back and forth. And then everything that I have that falls, so I can tell you, let's go to it. Okay, I keep putting it off, so let's go to it. This is a lunar return. No, I did lunar returns for the month before too, because that is the last lunar return that was actually valid before my father's death. And so I brought it up, and it does have pain level or pain on it with some karma, and it does have Achilles, and you can see the pain down here at 3. Here we go. 3 degrees of Capricorn shows up again. 3 degrees 5 versus that angle of 3 degrees 9. This is the stuff that really makes astrology really exciting, is when you start seeing that's matching up with that, and it's only reaffirming your story. So this was the actual lunar return that took place, and look what's featured here: endings. So even for that lunar return, endings. Okay. And the sun, well, the moon and the Jupiter are in the second. And again, I did start working with new teachers at that time. It was very, very exciting for me. And a moon Jupiter is like women who are teachers. And that is exactly true. Here, the sun is in aspect to that. You see, it's 10 degrees, but it's still there. So is that Mercury. And what you got to understand is this lunar return was telling me it's the end for, sorry, not Mercury, it's Venus. It's the end for a man that I love. And he was a very strong man. So the Mars, the Venus, the sun, all that the eye see with those endings also were telling me. So that was literally, my father died about a month later. Okay. Now, let's get to this. So when I get into these returns, and here we are, first of all, note that these are not the same. And I don't know how to correct that except for to say that when I go from one program to another, there has to be tweaking that takes place if I want them to be absolutely identical. Okay. So here, we've seen this chart already, but remember I told you about the dreams? Look what's right here on the midheaven. Dreams of Saturn, dreams of 3 degrees, I get that? And Saturn is 1 degree. How wonderful. Also a lot about love and boundaries, and that is also in there. There's the sun and the moon. Every bit of that is in aspect to that midheaven. Here, Urania, Kronos. This is where it becomes very clear, number one, that there's an issue with, it's a retrograde too. It's a trine. There's a trine here, a very strong trine. And my Saturn, my own Saturn, is opposite this point. So my own Saturn in this chart would fall right here. Okay, literally right on it. And so here again, it's talking about the Kronos Saturn, that, an authority figure is my father, son, Kronos. Do you see how that all, and it's all on the angle. So you have this conversation. But the other beauty is here is Urania also being aspected. This is when I started really delving into, I had up until this point been self-taught. And this is when I really delved in and started to take the dive to get teachers and get even better. So at this point, Urania is also talking astrology. It's also talking about during this time, this is very true, I had to be very logical and I had to be strong. And Volcanus, which is in my chart, also being aspected by this. And this is where you have to go back and forth. And it's really easy to pop your own chart in there and see Volcanus at 26 degrees of Gemini 56. That's in there with all that other stuff. And at that time, and here's Cupido, another family, where I really had to, especially when my brother passed, I had to step to the plate And my mother just couldn't handle all of that. And things with my brother, him and I had discussed between us. So I really didn't know what to do. So in this case, and you can see that I was close to my brother in the respects that we actually came in to be together. He is right there. I came in with Juno right on the IC. So I came in with somebody. It also means I'm good at partnerships and yada, but I came in with somebody. I also want to point this out. See this 27 degrees? That's my Chronos. That Chronos is still an aspect to that 18 degree 55. So it would fall on the descendant of that chart. So what you're doing is you're going in and you're picking up all those things from the natal chart that circle around the angles of the return charts. So you go to the return charts, you get the angles. Here's that 18 degree Scorpio. Up here is where that Volcanus would fall. Okay. And there's our Adamitas. But at this point, I like this. This also explains some things to me. Adamitas is 15 degrees, right opposite my moon. My mom is going through something really terrible. And it's bringing chaos, which is what that is. And it did. There's withdrawal because of pain right there on this midheaven. It was really slow to deal with a lot of this stuff. And a lot of the stuff did come to me through my dreams. So it's just really, and the turning points of Chiron and all of this is in that chart. I mean, I could go on and on and on. Okay. This and the lunars, because even the lunars, each of the lunars really does feature similar houses, similar points to what the charts did. Okay. And this chart is pretty, why does it say January 7th? And the other one says, let me see, this one's not really a return. Hold on. This is what I mean by, oh, this is really a return. Maybe the other one wasn't. Hold on. Oh, no, it was. Yeah, I'm old. So they could be on 2 separate days because I'm old. And the time corrected, I just want to see this. The time corrected, so you have your moon here in the second house conjuncting Jupiter. And then when you get to this chart, the moon is I'm young then. Whoa. The moon is a little bit, what I'm trying to point out is the moon is different. The moon here is at 1545 and the moon here is at 1516, I believe, 1514. As we age, so does our moon in a sense, like, you know, by when you're doing lunar returns. So if I'm doing precision or precess right now at this point in my life, I'm actually into the 16 point. So 16 degrees. So it does change. I did want to point that out. Here's something else. This isn't on this angle. This is a lunar return. But look at this 9th house with Urania to Kronos. I did find, and it's interesting because it's coming to the midheaven here. It's not in aspect. It would have to be 26 degrees to be in aspect. But it's just, and if we look at the other chart, I think it's further away. It is. Okay. But it's close to that 9th house cusp. Now it's getting, you know, closer to the cusp. But when you look at the actual charts, look at that. It's right on the ascendant. So it manifested itself right there. And I really did find astrology teachers, and I started going to big, what do they call it? Seminar, you know, big congregations of other astrologers. And it was a pretty exciting time in my life, but it was also one of the most difficult times of my life. The 27 degree Pluto is really interesting because in my personal chart, that is also the opposing place for Kronos, which would mean on the dial, it would be the same place. So I did kind of dart around a lot. One of the things, and I haven't done this yet I'll have to find out where I could do this, but one of the things you want to do is I would want to go and put inside of there each one of these charts, these return charts, okay? And then the outer portion, I would want to be my real chart. And then you could begin to look at what, and this is the lunar, I'm sorry, I actually did the wrong charts. I forget that in this chart, these are up here. Let me go back. I did them backwards compared to before. So what I want to do is I want to do outer here and inner here. There we go. So here we have 23 degrees, and you can see there it is. There is that 23 degrees Saturn that somehow there are separations or there are losses of people that I would talk to or would know on a daily basis. The ascendant, my personal ascendant, is on the midheaven of this particular chart, along with the Venus, the moon, and the sun, and there's my sun. So look at this reinforcement. So any conversation going on with this sun is also happening with this one. Here's that Volcanus I was talking about. Here's that Kronos we talked about. Now, I don't have any asteroids and biwheels. That you would have to do on your own if you're an asteroid astrologer. I actually do a completely different, I don't always use the biwheel. I actually create on a piece of paper my own angles, and I put everything that fell so that I could get the trans-Neptunians and the asteroids in there. I take all of everything that I find here. But in this particular chart, we have a lot here. We don't have to do that. You don't have to take the asteroids to prove my point. And there's our other place. So you would do the same thing, and you would do the same thing with lunar returns. That the way I'm treating these solars is exactly the same as I would treat a lunar. So I would, again, go back in, and again, I have to get pick up how to do this on Janus, because so many of you are using Janus that I really want to put that in first, and then that. And there we go. So this is the 18 Scorpio chart, and you can see that, again, we still have what I call hot angles. There's a lot going on. Here we have Pluto, Zeus, we have Chiron as a transiting. So we know there's transformations that are new beginnings, but also that are, very kind of jerky, sudden. And by the way, that like the Neptune Uranus was explaining here, they were sudden deaths. Okay. Look how close to my Venus. It was just such a time, such a year. Look at this South Node. That's a transiting to my Kronos. Now my South Node's not in that angle, but how close it is. But that Adamitas is. So we have an Adamitas South Node equaling my Kronos. And that's how you start having conversations, and you start reading them together. And then you take the Kronos to the sun. So we know that it's a male authority. Something's going on with the male authority, and you have to add in that Adamitas. So it all goes together. Again, we could go through this chart. I could talk about rulers to each of these houses. We could go into the asteroids in more depth. We could set up axes, which actually we'll do for just one moment. I want to go back in, and you would do this with each of them. But remember that the ascendant and the midheaven are the same as the IC and the descendant. So if you're going for the ascendant, let me see if I can get there. Okay, sometimes it stops and sometimes it don't. Okay, Kronos, and I believe, no, it did. It passed the ascendant. This is, I believe, the Gemini Ascendant, which, let me go back into the chart. And this is the program thing. This is just a program, 2336. Then you have to get the right. And as soon as I get close to that, it would be here. It'll show up. See that? So these are your midpoints. We've talked about those. I just did a video on them. I may do that at another point down the road. But look at all this, okay? And it was a good year for making connections. And so the midheaven node, the node, that all happened. So, that's all true. And remember that the ascendant's also coping mechanisms. That's important to remember. One of the things I like to do is find what's going on around that ascendant, and we can go pretty far, and start pulling in some of those asteroids, even though some of them will be square and opposite those points. And you could then turn around and do the same for the midheaven. That's another ascendant. I believe that there is a midheaven in here. Let me go pick it up because the chart isn't. 2916 Aquarius. So let's talk about that. I forgot. I did this video and had to redo it. So I did talk about this in the last one. In Janus, this actually is 2955. Here it's 2916. But let me tell you something. When you see 29 as an angle, something is ending. Something is definitely ending. And that is true in this case. So we had that 29 degrees. Now I'll go back to the dial. So what I would do on the dial is I would go to that 2916. There it is, or 2924, but you can really get it to the minute. But start looking across the way, because these factors are also a part of this, as well as all these factors. Okay, so there is a conjunction, a correlation, if you will. You could even do it at 2230, but then you'd want to make sure that that midheaven and that ascendant were as accurate as could be. So since we can't really know that, what I would suggest you do is go to the sun. And if you're going to do an axis, look at this, sun to pain level. And here we go again. Yes, I was grieving a lot that year, because I would grieve, and then months later I would be grieving again, and months later I would be grieving again. Okay. And that couldn't be more true. It was a slow recovery. They're slow. And it's just slow also because it just felt like there was one death after another. So it's almost like you couldn't recover from one till there was another one. The other thing is that child is here, and I did have a very young child at the time who's now grown up. And the other factor of the child is that during the course of the year, my mother, who I did leave up that Demeter because it was really critical to everything that was going on, that my mother was going through a tremendous amount. Cirrus, which we did not look at, but you could. And one of the things that you would do is if you were, that's Hades. Hades is a factor. I mean, you could look at a lot of different things. The Uranus was so strong, and with that black moon, that you know that what was happening very, very quickly. All of the deaths were sudden. All of them were young, so they were not expected. So you did have a lot of that. I also wanted to look up, here it is. Cirrus is running with Juno, and at that time there was a lot of bonding with my mother. So Cirrus is not the same as Demeter. Demeter showed up a lot more with, and you can see it full out. Well, Janus, we really saw it. So let's go back to Janus. You can really see the Cirrus. She's right here. She's in the middle of everything. So that is a real telling point. But one of the things that you want to do is you always want to look at both the precessed and the regular solar return. That's why I just call it this regular, because they're playing off of each other. And even though you have all of this right off of the ascendant, the Pluto, the Cupido, something's changing in the family. When you pull up the other chart, all of that is up here at the midheaven. So it's never leaving an angle on either chart, which in and of itself is a red flag. That there's something going on. The idea, though, is that what you want to do is you want to look at, so it's a ninth house and it's a first house, and you want to start combining them in terms of where they fall in the chart, how that matters or affects your life, how that stellium, because that's a stellium. That is, other than Mars, Demeter, Vulcan, the sun, moon, Venus, they're all an aspect to each other. For that matter, so is Saturn. Okay, so even though it's out of sign, it's close enough to that Venus to be in that ball game. And then if you're going to pull Saturn, and you're going to pull Mercury. And the other thing I want to point out is that Saturn, Mercury is also, now in this case, it's a 10th house. And I'm going to tell you that's a featured element here, because I lost my brother and my cousins lost a sister. And so there was this whole, we as siblings really, we really went through it. Okay. The nodes, the south node in particular, is very much in square to that particular midheaven. And the north node then is also in a square. You see that? See? They're in opposition, and there is our sun, but there's our midheaven. So like everything is like right there. So that we know that the nodes, our connections that are going on that year, are very strongly associated to that. And it took both charts to see that. So I'm not only dealing with them on the ascendant, I'm dealing with them on the midheaven. And you really want to look at that because the two together really complete the story. You don't want to only look at one because you're only getting half a story. I mean, you could, it wouldn't be wrong. There is no wrong, but I would strongly encourage looking at both of those charts. And then I would strongly encourage taking a chart, either doing it on a printer and then putting in all of the natal configurations for each of these points, whether it be your trans-Neptunians, your asteroids, whatever it is that you work with, even if it's just planets. We didn't go beyond planets a lot today. And everything we needed to know about that year was still very thematic. It's a theme in the chart. And I think that's what this is about. So let me come back. And I just want to say goodbye this way. I really don't want to be in the little square saying goodbye. But I want to reiterate that when you're doing lunar and solar returns, that you are gleaning so much information that you can't help but learn more. And that take for yourself, take a time in your life that was really crazy, a year that was really bad or really good, and start comparing them. Start looking at them, especially if you're using Janus. I just showed you how you could take your years and begin to look at them one by one. Or take a series of lunar returns and look at them. I actually think lunar returns are something that I like to look at only when I get very close to that time period. And I tend to review them more as I'm going into them or in hindsight. But everybody's different. And I think that return charts are one of the most incredible learning mechanisms that we have, that we can learn on our own and let the charts guide you. If nothing else, you'll learn to trust a chart by doing these. They will teach you to trust the chart. They have me. They've also been the cornerstone of my business. And they have been, let's just put it this way, they still are. And the clients that I have will still, not only do they get them every year, but they will still call me in between. And, you know, some cases, because maybe somebody's going through something, we're doing lunars. In other cases, just to put a tweak in my ear about how the chart might be really coming to fruition in their life. And you'll notice, as I said, I lost 3 people, and it even told you in there over and over again. It didn't all happen within 1 month. I lost people months apart, and that's the way the charts are. There are timing techniques, which eventually I'd like to teach, and there are other ways that when you get into these charts, you can literally start to pinpoint when you can expect the next shoe to drop or the next wonderful thing to happen based on these charts. For example, I'm in my lunar return, my solar return for this year. Yeah, we're always in a lunar return too. But I'm in a solar return for this year, and I'm coming to what would be a really important time because it's the first square of that chart in May, early May. So within the next couple of weeks, and I already know it's going to be really insane. So, but that's okay. It was really insane coming into my birthday. So I almost expect it to be insane, and I'm prepared for it. It's good stuff. It's not bad stuff. It's just that at my age, too much good stuff it's tiring as well. But in any event, I really hope that you got something out of this. Go home, do these. Well, what am I saying? Go home. You are home. Get on your computers. Get on your astrology software. Go. I think Astrodees is another place you can go, astrodees.com. And I think for free, you can start setting up some charts too. And you might be able to go in there and start playing and see if you like this work. And if you do, then the investment in something like Janus would be worth it, or Solar Fire. But Solar Fire is a little bit more expensive. And if you're coming from out of the country, then you have to also think about how you're going to be switching from your amount to dollars and how is that going to affect what the cost is. So believe it or not, I didn't even upgrade Solar Fire. I actually bought Janus. So the reality is, although I wanted to try something different, so I have to be honest here, try it for yourself and see how you like it. And if you have any questions, please contact me. Comment, like, share. And as always, till I see you again, I want to wish you only happy readings. Thank you so much for watching. Take care and be well.